Hey everyone, Amayu here again, and I have thoughts. Slightly video game adjacent thoughts. Still trying to figure this whole thing out with recurring, but obviously we have our own little podcasty thing that me and my friend do. We talk about some video game adjacent things. And, well, mostly those are actually video games. So, I keep coming across this weird notion, and I know I'm going to make a lot of enemies. Not a lot. I'm going to piss some people off though. But you can't please everybody all the time. Otherwise, just people pleaser and you're being fake. But no. So came across more, well, Deltarune theories, evidence things, and I don't want to turn it into that again. Just see my first video if you want to see my thoughts about the Deltarune theories and how you're probably wrong, but that's okay. Anyway, to put it in a way that doesn't immediately turn me into some kind of hater. Well, first of all, I mean, look, I'm a furry on the internet. You know, I do the gay stuff sometimes, although I'm mostly whatever on that type of thing. But point being is I'm a part of a community that is intertwined with representation of the self, of multiple lifestyles, and for the most part, everyone's understanding and accepting of, everything gay, lesbian, bi, trans, everything. Now, where this comes into play with video games is it started with Veilguard, right? Veilguard, if you like it, you like it. Not gonna say you're wrong for liking it. It definitely could have been written a whole lot better. But that's where representation really started coming into things like video games. And that execution was terrible. Not my personal opinion, it was terrible. They could have done so much more and made it. Well, first of all, it didn't feel very Dragon Age, just from what I've seen. I haven't played it. I haven't even played the second game or the Inquisition game. I know they're supposed to be good games. Didn't hear quite the same for Veilguard, but it has people that enjoy it. And lightly going into theory territory with the whole Deltarune thing. And I don't think this should be the case for any game unless the game is exploring self-discovery. And it has to be done right. Go back to Veilguard, the dinner scene. And I could be missing something here. If you see this, and you think I am, let me know. But the dinner scene at Veilguard, where the character says they are non-binary and go by they. And then the next line of dialogue being the mother saying their culture has a word for that. It's in their native language, so it's a different word. But then she gets upset. She gets upset that she was acknowledged that she was this other word that also means they, them. And it was... Why? What was that scene supposed to convey? It wasn't executed very well. So, coming across more of this gender theory stuff involving Deltarune. Not going to spoil Deltarune stuff, I'm just going to talk about how people seeming to think that their people's gender, be it trans or whatever, or turning into something else, is going to matter for the story to continue. And I don't think the way the story's going that it can be done in a way that's tasteful. I mean, Toby Fox could maybe pull something out and make it an amazing reveal and how that character is the key. Maybe not because of their transness or lesbianness or whatever. But because that character is the key, they are the key, they just happen to be that thing. You know, the examples I gave. And I just find it very confusing that these theories are so hard leaning into that's what's going to make them that character. That's what's going to make them the key, is their identity of gender and their relationship with a same-sex individual or whatever. It's absurd because Toby Fox has already written in both of his games a lesbian, well, one of them straight up is, but the other one is like, it's there, it's a world building, it's surface, and like, but it's also part of the true ending. So it's like, you only see that if you make it to that point. I just find it, people, and I actually talked here. Look at it this way. I talked in my Discord server that I'm in. I asked them if Toby could write a character being trans in a way and represent it properly in a good light and not have it be forced. Because that's the key. You can't force a character's, like, you know, gayness or what have you, any of it. You can't force it into somebody's face without having some kind of reason or payoff. And then it just comes off as disingenuous, and it's not a great look for any of that to happen. So it's, I suppose this stupid VRC. Anyway, I chose to do this. Anyway, but the idea of, again, I know there are games that explore these things. Like here, I'll give you an example. Fragments of Him. It's a narrative game. I'm not going to say too much about it because it's really worth your time, and if you watch this, go play it, because it is about a gay man growing up in like the 60s, 70s, I believe it was, and finding himself. And that's the entire game. It does dive into the politics of how gays were treated back in that day and how they were, ridiculed and all that. And it tells a really good story, even though it does touch politics that, obviously disagree with that way of living. But it's the entire purpose. It tells you the story. It makes you appreciate, like, minor spoiler, but the mother, she doesn't understand what her son is going through in college. She doesn't even know for a good chunk of it. But she still loves him, even though she doesn't understand. And it is told in a really good way. It actually comes from the heart of the developer that made it. But people saying, and this is where I'm going to kind of go into the one theory that's triggered this, thought that I've had, like, but Ralsei needing to be trans femme. And I don't know why this needs to be. Because if you know the story, you know how Ralsei feels about Ralsei. Again, I'm not going to dive into it, but for the sake of spoilers, you just got to figure that, is it going to add to anything in the end? If that's the case. I don't think it will. Ralsei is Ralsei. Ralsei will always be Ralsei, even if you call him, like, the save points and stuff in the first chapter, Fluffy Boy, or if they just end up being they, it's not going to change the progress of the story. And I feel that's the point. That's the linchpin of, like, it feels like people are trying to push this narrative just to be represented for the sake of representation. And if you represent and show somebody being a certain way, and it's not done in a good way, and I have an example in mind, but if it's not done in a good way, all that's going to do is it's going to hurt the story of whatever was going on in some small way, even if the main story stays the same. Like, a perfect example is the Persona 5, the gay couple, or whatever, in the city street. They actually had to change how aggressive those characters were in approaching these, high school age students. And that's because it wasn't done very well. I mean, I played through the first base game and it's like, that's kind of awkward. They probably shouldn't be saying that. And that's a AAA company. So pushing this narrative that, again, in games, in movies, although if it's in a movie, it's probably what the movie's about. But if it's not fragments of him, and it's not trying to tell that story, it doesn't need to tell that story. It's kind of how I believe it was Overwatch and Tracer, they had the comic and everything, and Tracer's a lesbian. Okay, and I'm sure you have a really good story behind that and a history for the character, but your average casual Joe that plays just to shoot things and they play the game to enjoy the team aspect of objective pushing. They're not going to care if a character is bi, lesbian, gay, whatever. They're not going to care if the gameplay is solid. And that's where people need to really think about. And this is where I'm probably going to pinch some nerves. And this is what I was talking about in the Discord, is these people that I've been listening to, these theories and the strong Velgard defenders that say the story's perfect. It's not perfect. They just specifically put, they try to identify as being in transition is their identity. And I saw a video a while back related to Velgard, and this other person who was also trans said that you're not looking to be trans. They were talking about the chest scars option. And it's the scars to them, if I recall correctly, were a reminder of what they were. So they would prefer not to have the scars and instead be, without the scars, to be, if I remember right, it was male. So if you want to be male, you don't want to have these huge scars to remind you of where you were, because that just adds to some kind of dysphoria, I'd imagine. Again, if I'm wrong with any of this, correct me. But to talk about, the goal is to be I actually know somebody who's going she. You know what? She. That's it. She's she. That's all she wants to be. That's all she needs to be. There's none of this in the middleness of, you don't speak. It's like a train ride, right? Aside from the similarly others. Your goal is to get from A to B. The least amount of time that you spend being in that middle period, the better. Because I've seen, I don't know, a little bit of how like you're getting stuck. You're stuck in a loop, and you're like you're still in the process of figuring out how to move forward after you've identified yourself with this. And if you want to make a game about that, or have a story of a character in a game like that, that's amazing. You can, and if you write it well, people will feel it and they'll know it. Hope you didn't hear that. Stupid door. Anyways, real moment here. So, but I believe you get what I'm getting at. Basically, if you want to tell a story of a lifestyle, make it genuine, plain and simple, and people will feel it. But if you force it, it's just gonna hurt that kind of flow, and any kind of like bad representation is not good. So I know it kind of off tangented from video games specifically, but it's something that's been coming up in games a lot lately, and I'm all for options. Have the he, she, they toggle thing. I don't care. If it makes you happy, that's all that matters, right? But that only works for self-insert characters. If it's a predetermined story, those characters are going to be those characters. They have to be well written. You have to be genuine with how they are and what their life is, what their life was, and what their life's going to be. So, before I talk in circles and ramble on again, that's all I'm going to talk about for today, but yeah. Thank you all if you watched this far through my insanity, and I will hopefully have something more concrete coming up. I want to try to again revive this channel, make it gameplay on the weekdays, and have like a weekend rant video about something that I care about, but we'll see. If you want to see me and my friend talk about Nintendo's latest patent thing and all that stuff, and just general Nintendo, we have our Off the Paw podcast. If I remember right, I'll link it in the description, but if I can. But for now, thank you all. And if you agree, if you disagree, let me know why. And I'll see y'all next time.